Well, you found yourself in perhaps the most contentious sector of the renewable energy industry of all. Wind farms a decade ago were at the vanguard of the renewables debate, the most cost-effective technology and the most likely to roll out at large scale across the country under the country's renewable energy target, which was, I think, 20% by 2020. Is there something about wind energy you think that makes it especially contentious?
Yeah, I always have a soft spot for wind. I love it for its complications, if that makes sense. Solar has a bit of a sci-fi feel to it, but wind is just like this sort of almost traditionalist thing. And wind has very different roots to solar. Wind was developed, it was developed in many places in the world, partly the US, but it had its really, really early days in Denmark. And it was developed as part of a push to have more localized cooperative approaches to energy generation.
As against nuclear?
As against nuclear specifically, yeah. And so it was a pushback against corporatized ownership of energy. And so one of the first wind turbines in the world was this sort of almost handmade machine developed as part of the Twin School in Denmark. And they had help. They had help from a few wind developers who gave them like specs and materials and things like that, but they physically constructed it themselves, which is amazing. So it has this heart to it, and that sits in such diametric opposition to the other side of how it has grown, particularly as a corporatized technology, which is it has inspired a lot of hate, a lot of strong reactions, particularly around aesthetics, particularly around the feelings of communities and ownership, and the way like physical technological change happens around people. And so that drama, that conflict, is just so incredible to me. I don't think I'm ever going to stop loving wind power for that.
Can you talk about the community ownership model that, the pioneering Hepburn wind farm that Simon Holmes à Court had a lot to do with? That's a much more optimistic model, isn't it? And do you think it can be replicated and has been replicated successfully in Australia?
Yeah. So Simon's project was fully community owned, which is really tough.
So where are we? We're down in country Victoria.
Yeah, that's right. It's two turbines, two really cute turbines, painted by a local artist.
Owned by the community.
Yeah, fully owned by the community. So everybody has a share, and the electricity that they sell and they get money from, the money flows back into the community, right? As proof that you could do this and it actually works, it was really, really significant because a whole bunch of other projects have come up since then. Often what you get is this partnership between a developer and a community either investing in some way or actually just having a benefit scheme. So they have like your electricity bills are $0 because you live next to a wind farm or something like that. There's a range of them and they've worked really, really well. This is going to have to become a thing again, right? It's kind of dropped off the radar a little bit because renewable energy growth has slowed somewhat, or it's kind of been concentrated around a few large projects. But over the next decade, over the next 5 to 8 years, we are going to have to develop a lot of renewable energy to replace coal-fired power stations closing down, and it's going to have to be developed in the right way.
You write quite beautifully that, quote, climate action has to be a warm hug from a friend, not a stern dressing down from a science teacher. What do you mean?
I really think that people need to be invited into climate action as opposed to converted, if that makes sense. I don't think they need to be convinced or kind of preached at or have their minds changed. I think that people very much already have the feeling or the instinct to, if not help themselves, then help the people around them. Both of those things are elements of acting on climate change. There's a selfish element and there's a community element. That's most people covered, right? If you like yourself or if you like other people, there aren't that many people who don't like either, right? So that sentiment, that feeling is already there. The challenge lies in making climate action such that people come to it themselves as opposed to sort of being pushed into it, right? This is really, really difficult. So the balance is really, really tricky to meet. And it's completely different for every different sector. So we talked about wind turbines and community ownership, right? But when it comes to the exact moment of development, the very, very early days, there's two different things that happen. One is that a developer will walk into a community and say, hello, I'm a developer. I would like to build a wind turbine in your town. It's going to happen, so you better come along for the ride. And some of you will get some stuff and some of you will get nothing. The other thing that can happen is that communities can hear about the benefits of renewables and go, hey, I want that in my town. I want a solar farm, I want a wind farm. How come this other community is getting all this, all these people who live around this wind farm are getting so much? I want that too. That has a very different result on a generalized scale. Of course, right down at the level of individual projects and stuff like that, you're going to find many different things happening. But on the generalized scale, if people can basically come to it themselves, that's a really, really different thing, right? However, for that to happen, you need major structural, political, and systemic changes, right? That is something that you need to pressure and force and push through, right? Making the world such that people can come to climate action themselves.
Why are you worried about climate doomism?
It really, really worries me because I think it's more powerful than climate change denial. So just to clarify what that is, first of all, climate change denial emerged as an intentional thing, right? This was a plan. In the early 2000s, a lot of people with interest in fossil fuels were like, cool, what do we have in our toolbox? And they kind of looked back at the tobacco industry and the way that they mucked with the science, and they were like, cool, let's also muck with the science.
The merchants of doubt.
The merchants of doubt. It took a lot of money for that to happen. It actually wasn't easy for those PR companies and those lobbyists and misinformers and media misinformers to actually make that happen. They had to pour a lot of time and money into it to make it happen. There was no natural sense of denial from the public. People actually have an instinct generally to trust scientists when they hear that sort of thing. As we saw with COVID, there's really not all that much COVID denial to the extent where it's influencing policies. Climate doomism is feeling like the moment has passed. The moment for action has sailed by, and there is really not much we can do anymore to stop the worst impacts of climate change, right? That is incorrect. Climate change is a problem that is completely linear, right? The IPCC report that came out last August has this amazing chart that I just couldn't get out of my head for weeks and weeks. I couldn't stop thinking about this line. And it's a line that is drawn between how much emissions we release and how much the planet heats, right? And it's just every ton you save, you avoid, puts you a little bit further down that line and reduces global heating by a linear and predictable amount. That is a very, very good thing. What we're seeing more and more is that the instinct to feel like there is nothing we can do is getting stronger and stronger. This is really human and it's really real, and it's something that unfortunately we're actually seeing more and more in young people. Obviously there's the youth climate movements and things like that. That is an expression of rage that is related to fatalism, because they are feeling not like we're totally doomed and that there's nothing that can be done, but actually that they don't have connection to the halls of power. They don't have any connection to change and power. And really, if you want to help young people, help them get connected to power, Don't don't kind of just use them as oh, isn't it great that all the young people have it? Help them have an influence, and that will cure, that will help ease the pain that they're suffering from this sort of sense of doomism that's spreading.